Joining us now is Jason Schenker, President and Chief Economist at Precision Economics. Jason, great to have you with us. This idea of reciprocity, this idea of using tariffs in order to negotiate with other countries, he has used this in his first term as president. But how much more volatility does this add to the markets, especially given that businesses really don't know where this could go from here?
I think this presents a lot of risk. I think that there are some significant concerns, but at the end of the day, we find ourselves in the middle of Cold War II, and what President Trump is trying to do, it seems, and his intention is to increase the potential for U.S. economic security, and with that, U.S. national security. And as we think about what is economic security, I think we all know what national security is, but economic security really has two pillars. One is economic power of a country. Think about GDP or the strength of U.S. equity markets, things like that. The other is if we think about economic self-sufficiency. And of course, U.S. supply chains very exposed to a number of countries that are now becoming much more adversarial to the United States. I think specifically China. And if that's really going to be a supply chain that has to be fully decoupled, this is going to be a lever to drive additional concessions that support U.S. national security and U.S. economic security aims.
You know, right now we're hearing from President Trump speaking in an interview with Fox News saying that he actually spoke with China's Xi Jinping since his inauguration. We have seen those tariffs additional on China. We have seen retaliatory tariffs from Beijing as well. When it comes to China, though, how much power does President Trump have in order to negotiate? Because we're not talking about smaller, more vulnerable, more dependent economies.
I think that the intention here is to try to isolate China and the other countries in its Cold War II alliance, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And I think as part of that strategy, if we think about how did economic soft power diplomacy work in Cold War I, the United States used its financial and economic power in order to get a number of other countries to help isolate its adversaries. I think that as President Trump is pushing through these tariffs, the intention isn't necessarily to exact any kind of additional pain on countries that may be unaligned. I think the intention here is to get those countries to give either some level of geo-economic, national security, or economic concessions, like we've seen with influence around, say, Panama and the push there to get Panama to reject the Belt and Road Initiative. In other words, if you're taking money from China, can't take money from the U.S. as well. And I think this is part of that tool to really drive a further wedge between China and unaligned countries.
Jason, do you think that will be successful? Because, of course, the major difference this time around is that Beijing is struggling with an economy that is structurally in a worse place than the first time that we had a trade war.
Well, I'm not thinking about a trade war. I'm talking about the Cold War. And so if we think about where China is now, China's much stronger economically than in 1989 when the wall fell. I'm thinking about, well, China is much stronger, although right now it's economically weaker. Why is it weaker? Well, because foreign direct investment has fallen significantly in terms of annual levels going into China. Why? Because China looks like a great place to send your money if you never want to see it again. And so I think these kinds of moves, geopolitically, using tariffs as a way to drive policy changes among non-aligned countries to get them to be more compliant, to help to prevent Chinese tax evasion, Chinese tariff evasion, tariffs or taxes, through transshipments. I think a lot of that is the focus. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they've collaborated economically, militarily, technologically. We've seen that in Ukraine. We saw it in Israel. We risk seeing that in Taiwan. That's, I think, what is really driving these moves by the Trump administration.
Are markets, are traders being too complacent at this point?
I think there's a lot of supply chains to unwind here. I don't necessarily think there's complacency. I think that the United States is the strongest economy in the world, has one of the fastest growth rates, has had for a number of years now, one of the fastest growth rates of any advanced economy in the world, has the plurality, if not outright majority, of global market caps. So I think I would still be betting, and I would here, on the United States to win this. I do think, though, that there are going to be moments of volatility and, of course, questions. And we saw it last week with Mexico, with Canada, what's going to happen. And these trade and tariff risks, they hang like a sword of Damocles above these trade partners,
right,
as well as above U.S. businesses, adding volatility and risk of peril. But in the end, I do think you're going to see a number of these countries come up with concessions that will probably further isolate the Chinese economy. So I'd be very concerned if I was long China.
One way that President Trump wants to build that economic security, of course, is through really dominating the age of AI. We have seen all of these gyrations around tech companies, lofty valuations at this point. We already heard that Elon Musk is now bidding for that nonprofit that controls OpenAI. Do you expect more gyrations in the tech sector, or is this also going to be for 2025 the sector to dominate markets?
I think tech's got a lot of opportunity. We still have a very tight labor market in the United States. 7.6 million open jobs as of December, 4% unemployment rate, jobless claims, continuing claims below 1.9 million. I mean, it's a tight labor market in the United States. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity. Companies are looking for leverage, and that's what they're looking to for AI. But as I look forward in the not too distant future, I'm sure you're very well aware about document 79, in which China had released in 2022 its intention to essentially remove any U.S. hardware and software from the Chinese economy, and what some folks have called delete A or delete America. I think we're going to see the countervailing balance of that. And that's going to be to delete any Chinese hardware or software from the United States and from its allies.
Right.
What that means is companies like DeepSeek and the like, and TikTok, we'll have to see where everything goes going forward. But I suspect not just that software, but hardware going forward, if it's made in China, you won't be able to use it in the United States.
Jason Schenker, good to have you with us, President and Chief Economist at Prestige Economics.